In this video, I'm going to walk you through Excel Module 9, End of Module Project 1. The first thing you need to do is download the instruction file and the start file. Once you've downloaded the start file, make sure you change the end of the file name from a 1 to a 2, and then verify that your name is displayed in cell B6. Otherwise, if it does not, make sure you download a new copy, remove the first one from your computer, download a clean one, and start over before proceeding, or you will have issues with the Cengage grader. In this project, we have Enzo DePrima, who's the operations manager for Forno Pizza. He's developing an Excel workbook to send to franchise owners and managers to help them understand the payroll, the budget, and staff scheduling. First thing he asks us to do is to help correct some errors and solve some problems within the data. So we're going to go to the staff worksheet, which lists the employees. We're going to correct the errors in the worksheet using any error checking method. We're going to determine the source of the name error in cell F13, which should calculate the average daily wage, and then we're going to correct that error in cell F13. So let's go to our start file. We want the staff sheet, which is where I'm at, and we're looking for the first error that is name, and that's up. Let's start from the top and work our way down. So that is cell F13. And if you click on that cell, you're going to go up and you're going to look at the formula. And just by looking at it, we know what the issue is. There is an @ symbol in there. It shouldn't be there. And so the Excel doesn't know what to do with this formula. And so there are ways we can troubleshoot this. Say this, we didn't know what was happening. To do that, we're going to go to the Formulas tab, and then we have a section called Formula Auditing, and we are going to click on the one for error checking. So if I click that down arrow, we have error checking and we have trace error. For this step, we are just doing error checking, and it's going to bring up a box and it's going to say, this is the error. We can see what it is. The formula contains unrecognized text, which would be that @ sign. We can have help on this error, show calculations, ignore the error, or edit in the formula bar. What we are going to go ahead and do is that we are going to edit in the formula bar. I'm going to say got it. And then I'm going to take that @ symbol out. I'm going to go to the end, and then I'm going to resume. And it says we found a typo. And then I'm just going to close this down because we don't want to go on to the next one. So we remove that typo. Now, if there's these simple ones, you don't have to use error checking. You could just look at it and see there's an error to fix, and you could fix it that way too. But error checking is there if you aren't able to see what the error is about or what specifically may be causing the error. So we are done with this part in step 1. So we fixed the error in F13. In cell F22, we're going to use the trace dependence arrows to identify cells that depend on F22, and it's going to help us troubleshoot that error. And then we're going to edit the formula to correct the error and then make sure it's all fixed. So we're going to go to F22. Down here we have another hashtag name ? We don't know what's happening. Now, if we go up to the ribbon, for me, it's pretty obvious what's happening, but sometimes it might not be obvious. And so this time we are going to use something called trace precedence. So if we go up to the formula auditing gallery, at the top left, there's what we call trace precedence. It's going to show any cells affected by this formula. And so what it's doing is it's pointing to it's pointing to B20 through 22 and D20 through 22, and this looks okay, so we know that's not the part of the error. But going and looking at it, and I realized I just did something. We did the wrong thing. We do not want to do trace precedence, and I'm going to turn that off. We want to do trace dependence. So let's see. Let me delete these. Okay, so I'm gonna back up. I'm gonna remove all the arrows because I clicked on the wrong thing. So the instructions say, and this is where you have to watch if it says trace precedence or trace dependence. And so it's going back, F22, we're going to trace the dependence instead. And so it says that part of this formula is depending on this cell in F23, which is, okay, has an error in it as well because it's dependent on cell F22. So F23 is dependent on F22, and because one has an error, the other has an error. And so that's how we do trace dependence. Okay, so this one's dependent on this one. We're going to go up to the ribbon, and we know we've made a typo, and we have SOM instead of sum. So I'm going to put a U in there, and we're going to make that the sum function. Whoa, and I don't know what that just did. So we're going to make this sum of this range plus sum of this range. Remove that O, and then we are good. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those arrows now. So now we fixed this error, but we still have an error down here. So now we are down to, not that. We are done with step 2. We're on to step 3. In step 3, we're going to use the trace precedence. So here's where the precedence come in. Step 2 was dependence. Step 3 is precedence. And we're going to find the source of the div/O error. And we're going to correct the formula in F25, which should be dividing the net pay of F23 by the number of hours worked in F18. So let's go ahead and look for go back to our file. And we're going to put our cursor in F25. And then we are going to trace precedence this time. And so what you can see in this formula is it says equals F23 divided by F17. Well, we can see F17 is empty. There's nothing there. So we have an incorrect cell reference in there. And so we need to fix that to be F18 instead of F17. And so it's saying, I don't know how to divide this because a cell range has no data, or an actual cell reference has no data. So what we're going to do is just go to the ribbon, and we're going to go to the formula box, and we're going to change that F17 to an F18. And now you're going to see it's going to divide the correct cell references. And then I'm going to say enter. And now we have the correct answer and no more errors. And that is how we use trace precedence and trace dependence and error checking to determine errors if you couldn't figure it out by just looking at the formula. All right, in the next step, step 4, Enzo wants to make sure the hourly wages entered in the range E4 to E11 are between $10 and $20 an hour. We're going to set what is called a data validation rule in range E4 to E11 that allows only decimal number values from 10 to 20. So what this does is that you can set these rules up that if multiple people are entering data, that they have to enter it a specific way. And if they don't, it's going to give them an error message. So we're going to go back to our Excel spreadsheet. Let's make this just a little bit bigger. And we are going to go to data. And then I'm going to say, got it. And then we are going to select over in data tools. We're going to click the down arrow for data validation. And then we're going to choose data validation again. And the first thing we're going to do is we have to tell it what the criteria is. So we are going to set a data validation rule for the range of E4 to E11. Let's look at that. E4 to E11 that allows only decimal number values from 10 to 20. We're going to add an input message using hourly wage as the input message title and the following text as the input message. So we're going to go here and we are going to allow, and this is in the instructions, we are going to allow only decimal number values. So I'm going to choose decimal number values from 10, our minimum is 10, and our maximum is 20. If they put any number outside of that range, the next part that we put in is going to give them a message. So we've got decimal between 10 to 20. We're going to leave this ignore blank alone. We're going to go to the input message, and the input message is going to be named hourly wage. I can spell. And then the input message is going to be enter a number from 10 to 20. Okay, so what we're saying is in settings, decimal numbers between 10 and 20. So if somebody within the range that we're going to enter in next enters a decimal number between 10 and 20, it's going to give him this message that says hourly wage, enter a number between 10 and 20. The last stop we have is that on error alert, we are going to have it add a stop style error alert. So there's stop, warning, and information. This is a hard stop. And we want a stop to come up that's going to say the name of the title is going to be invalid wage. And then we are going to call this, confirm the hourly wage. The message is going to be confirm the hourly wage. And then I'm going to go back. And then I'm going to say, okay, now I just applied this to one cell. So what I should have done first, so let's undo this, okay? I'm going to undo that because I should have selected E4 to E11 first because this is the range. So E4 to E11 is where they're entering hourly wages. And so let's do this again. E4 to E11, data validation, settings, any decimal between minimum of 10, maximum of 20. Input message is going to be hourly wage. And that's the title, and the message is going to be enter a number from 10 to 20. And then we're going to go to the error alert tab. We're going to put a stop error message up. The title of this is going to be invalid wage, and the error message is going to be confirm the hourly wage. Make sure you spell everything just as it is in the instructions. So that's everything in step 4. Okay, so now let's go back. We're going to say, okay, now you're going to see something happen. So we have this, so anytime anyone selects on the cell, we have an hourly wage from 10 to 20. So if I were pretend I'm going to come down here and I'm going to change this 15, I'm going to change it to 25. It's going to give me that pop-up that we set in. It says you need to confirm that retry because that does not fit our criteria. And so I'm going to go ahead and undo that. But make sure, don't undo. Make sure you see this pop-up. So this hourly wage text input message is just letting us know each one of these cells we should be entering in a number between 10 and 20. Now we have one outside of the range right now, and we're not going to worry about that. So this is everything for step 4. In step 5, we're going to circle the invalid data in the worksheet, and then we're going to type 20 as the hourly wage in the cell containing that invalid data, which we can see that already. But we're going to do what we call circle the invalid data. And so to do that, we're going to come up here to data validation, and then we are going to, let me just put my cursor within that range first. We're going to come up to data tools, data validation, and then we're going to circle the invalid data. So we are circling the cell that we know does not meet that data validation rule that we put in. And so we are going to fix that 25, and we're going to change that to 20. And you can do that up in the formula bar or within the cell directly, just like that. Okay, and now that circle went away because we fixed that message, that error. All right, that's step 5. In step 6, we're going to go to the budget worksheet, which contains a typical weekly budget from Forno Pizza. And he's created what's called a scenario named promotions that calculates the weekly profit when the restaurant runs a promotion to increase business. And he wants to create another scenario that compares the weekly profit if the franchise raises prices. So we're going to add a new scenario called raise prices that uses the revenue from B4 to B5. The variable costs are going to be in range B9 to B10, and the fixed costs are B14 to B18 as the changing cells. And then we're going to enter the values from this table below. We're going to tell it specifically what we're going to look for, and it's going to run us another scenario. So let's go back to our worksheet. And the next place we're going to go to is on the data tab. And then we're going to go over to the what if analysis in the forecast gallery. Click that down arrow under what if analysis, and we are going to go down to the first one in the list, which is called scenario manager. And so what we are going to do is, it says there are no scenarios defined. Oh, sorry, because I'm on the wrong sheet. So first thing you need to do is go to the budget sheet. There we go. And this is where we should be. So budget sheet, data, forecast gallery, what if analysis, scenario manager. There we go. There's the scenario that it already refers to, that's already been built. We're going to create a new one. And so we are going to go ahead and we are going to click add. And the scenario name is going to be called raise prices. Then we are going to change cells B4 to B5, which is already there, B9 to B10, which is already there, and then B14 to B18. So we don't have to change anything here on the changing of the cells. And then we are going to go ahead and we are going to say, okay. And then here are our scenario values, which is going to come out of this table here on page 2, which I can't leave Word open for you because I've got a box open in Excel and I can't have one open over the other. So you're going to take the information out of this table for the cell values for raise prices scenarios, and you're going to put it in here. So dinners per week is going to be 1,400. Average order, this time we're going to change that 11 to a 12. Food and beverage is going to be 4,000. Supplies is 1,300. Payroll is 6,880. And then 800 for, let me scroll down. 800 for rent, 250 for insurance and miscellaneous. So the only thing we changed was the average order. So we changed the average order from 11 to 12. So if we charge $12 for an average order from 11 to 12, what is going to happen? And then let's click OK. And then we want to go down to the bottom and we want to show. So did you see what just happened here on the left? It changed this average order here. It changed these numbers. So let's click on, let's go to raise prices. Okay, so let's click the show for raise prices. There we go. So see how we can go back and forth between each scenario. So this is the first scenario. If we do a promotion for 11, if we raise our prices to, and let's look at it. Promotions at $11, our weekly profits a little over 2,000. If we raise our prices, what's happening? So let's show that. Okay, it goes up a little bit. Goes up almost $700. So that is the benefit of the scenario manager. And then we're going to go ahead and we are going to close that. So now we have 2 scenarios that we can apply to this budget. Okay, so that's step 6. In step 7, Enzo is ready to compare the weekly profit for the current values with those in the promotions and raise price scenarios. So we're going to create a scenario summary report using the weekly profit, cell B26 as the result cell, to show how the weekly profit changes depending on the revenue and cost changes. And we're going to call this the weekly scenario report. So now we're going to run a report of our scenarios using the result in cell B26. So back to this document here. Or this is our sheet, the budget sheet. We're looking at cell B26 is what's going to be involved in this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to data. We're going to go to the what if analysis again. We're going to go to the scenario manager, and then we are going to go down to, make sure I have this right. We're going to go down to the summary, and then we want to do a scenario summary with the result being in B26, and then we're going to say okay, and then it's going to come back and it's going to show us those two scenarios. So here's our current values. If we have promotions at 12, this is what happens, and then if we raise our prices here, this is what happens. And so you can see the difference between the two is that we had our supplies for raising prices at $1,300. Promotions, the supplies is set at $1,325. And so this is just a scenario of what happens with our two scenarios and then our current values when determining our prices and our expenses. And so at the bottom, the last thing we need to do is that we need to rename that worksheet to call it Weekly Budget Scenario Report. So we're going to go back to Excel, double click on the scenario summary on the bottom, and we're going to call this Weekly Budget Scenario Report. Now make sure you spell it exactly it is in the instructions, because if you spell something wrong, you'll miss the whole thing. Even if you did the steps right, you'll miss it all. All right, so that's step 7. In step 8, we're going to return to the budget worksheet, and Enzo wants to compare the changes to the total costs and the weekly profit of the two different scenarios. So this time we're going to do what's called a scenario pivot table report using the total costs and weekly profit from ranges B25 to B26. And then we're going to give it a name and format it into currency and apply the $ symbol. So going back to our start file, we're going to return to the budget sheet. So we're moving out of that report we created back to the budget sheet. And we're going to do the same process as above, except for there's a couple steps at the end that are going to be different. So we're going to go to data. We're going to go to what if analysis. We're going to go down. We're going to click on scenario manager. Then summary. And then instead of scenario summary, we're going to click the second radio button, which is scenario pivot table report. And so the range is going to be of this report. We want this to be B25 to B26. So you can either type that in there, we can add B25 colon, or we can go up, and then we can choose B25 to B26 just like that. And I'm going to hit enter. Now, the thing is I don't know if the grader is going to have issues with the $signs. So I'm going to turn those off. Well, that didn't work. Let's just type it in. So equals B colon, so B25 colon B26. Because we know the grader can be picky, and I don't know if it's going to have issues with the $sign. So we're going to type it in exactly as it is in the instructions. They don't have any absolute cell references from what I can tell. So back to that, just type that in like that. And then once we're done, we're going to go ahead and say okay. And then this is our scenario pivot table for those cells. And so we have promotions, and then we have raised prices, and then our total costs and our weekly profit. Now, we are not quite done. So we're going to call the sheet, or the tab of this worksheet, weekly budget pivot table. So let's do that first. So we're going to go down to the bottom, and I'm going to take out scenario, and we're going to call this weekly budget pivot table. And then the next thing it wants us to do is that it wants us to, let's see, let's check. We're going to use the currency number format. So for cells B4 to C5, we're going to format those cells with currency with 0 decimal places and a $sign. So going back, so B4 to C5, B4 to C5, we're going to go to the Home tab. In the drop down in the number gallery, click the down arrow, and we're going to go ahead and go down to more number formats. We're going to apply that to currency. We are going to have that with 0 decimal places, so change your decimal places from 2 to 0. And then we're going to make sure we have the $sign symbol, and then we're going to say OK. And so now we've formatted this pivot table that we've created based on the budget. All right, so this is step 8. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to the budget sheet, and we are going to, Forno Pizza traditionally holds an opening night party for each franchise, including the local media and others, to introduce the restaurant to a new location. So each restaurant has a budget of $300 for opening night. Enzo wants to know how many guests can attend with the costs in the range of E4 to E7. So we're going to use GoalSeek. We've used GoalSeek before. We're going to use it a little bit different way to set the budget to E7 for E7 to 300 by changing the number of guests in E6. So back to our worksheet. Go up to the ribbon. We're going to go to Data, and then What If, and then GoalSeek. And we are going to set the budget E7. So we're going to set cell E7 to a value of 300 by changing the number of guests in E6. Okay, so I want you to watch over here in E6. Right now we don't have a number, and so it's going to tell us how many guests we could invite to our opening night if the closing fee is this, the cost per person of this, and this is our budget. Once we have these numbers in here, these cell references and the value of 300, we're going to go ahead and we're going to say OK, and you're going to watch it do its magic, and it's going to come back and it's going to say, okay, with a budget of 300 and all the other costs, you can invite 15 guests to the opening night. And so that is what's happening at this one. So when we're done, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to say okay. All right, that's step 9. On to step 10. We're going to go to the schedule worksheet, which provides a sample schedule for employees working 5 consecutive days with 2 days off. Enzo wants to find the best schedule for these employees that provides enough staff while minimizing payroll costs. We're going to use the solver and use the weekly payroll as the objective in the solver model, with the goal of determining the minimum value for that cell. We're going to use the number of staff on each schedule is going to be the range of C4 to C10 as the changing variable cells. We're going to enter constraints based on the information below in table 2, and then we're going to save the solver model in B18, solve the model, keeping the solver solution. So the first thing you have to do is you have to turn on that solver add-on, and to do that we're going to go back to Excel and we're going to go to File and we're going to go down to Options, and then in the options on the left we're going to go down to Add-ins, and then you are going to add in the solver. So I already have it because I've already done this step, but if you don't have it, you're going to go down to the bottom, you're going to hit Go, and then you're going to look for the solver add-in. So I'm just going to turn that on again. So we need this for the step. Solver add-in, we're going to say okay. Perfect. And now we have this analyze gallery that's popped open here on the right that we couldn't see before. And this is what we're going to be working on. So now that we have that tab enabled and that button enabled, then we are going to click on solver. And now we have a bunch of information to put in. So the first thing it wants to do is that it wants I can get it to open right. Okay, so we have in the solver, use the weekly payroll C15, named weekly payroll as the objective cell in the solver model. Okay, so here's our objective for the solver model, and we want that to be C15. So I'm going to click the up arrow. I'm going to go find C. Is that right? Oh, I'm in the wrong place again. Cancel out of here. Okay. I'm in the wrong sheet. Go to schedule sheet. This is where you should be. Okay, let's try this again. Solver button. C15. So our objective is going to be C15 right here. Hit enter. Okay. And you can see it's given the name that it says in the worksheet. So weekly payroll as the objective. And then with the goal of determining the minimum value. So we're going to click minimum and the minimum value for that cell. And then we are going to, it says, so we set the minimum value for that cell. Then we're going to use the number of staff on each schedule as the changing variable. So C4 to C10. So right here, we're going to do the up arrow. We're going to go choose C4 to C10. These are the variables that we're going to change. And then the next thing we have is enter the constraints based on the information in table 2. So let's do that next. So we're going to enter the constraints. Whoops. Okay. So the first constraint is going to be so click add. And we are going to say the first constraint is going to be cell reference of, so the number of employees must be greater than or equal to 2. So C4 to C10, so let's choose C4 to C10, is, we're going to change this here, so greater than or equal to 2. And then we're going to add that one. And then our next one is going to be C4 to C10 again. So C4 to C10 is greater than, oh, sorry, is less than or equal to 8. So less than, there we go, less than, gator goes that way, or equal to 8. And then we're going to add that one. And then we have number of employees must be an integer. So we're going to say C4 to C10. Again, C4 to C10. And then this time in the center, we're going to choose int for an integer. And then the last one in that table, we're going to go ahead and say, okay, whoops, let me go back to the solver. And then we're going to add one more. And that is employees working each day must be greater than or equal to the staff needed. And so I'm going to add one more. And we're going to say D11 to J11. So D11 to J11. And then must be greater than. So greater than or equal to the constraint, which is D12 to J12. And then we're going to say D12 to J12. And then we're going to say, okay, let's go ahead and add that one. And then say, okay. Okay, so I'm going to get out of this box here, cancel here, which should take us back to the parameters. Okay, so we have our objective, weekly payroll. So while we were working on that, it is updated to the name. That's okay. Minimum by changing values of C4 to C10. And then we have things from the table. C4 to C10. This one should be, hold on, it changed the order for us. So C4 to C10 is greater than or equal to 2. And then C4 to C10 is less than or equal to 8. Then number of employees is an integer. And then D11 to J11 is greater than or equal to D12 to J12. Now, let's see what the next step is. So once we've done that, we've entered the constraints, we're going to use what we call the use simple XLP as the solving method. So let's go back. And then down here in the bottom, select a solving method. Now how they chose this one, I don't know. We're just going to go with the simplex LP, and then we're going to go ahead and go back to the instructions and see what's next. Then we're going to save the solver model, then solve the model, keeping the solver solution. So then let's save the model in B18. So we're going to, let's go ahead and load and save to B18. So go down to B18 right here under this solver model title. And then once that is done, we save the solver in B18, then we're going to solve the model keeping the solution. So back here, whoops, then we're going to save. Now we're going to go down to the bottom, and the last step is to solve the model, and then a window is going to pop up, and then it says, what do you want to do? Keep solver solution, restore original values. This is where we would click on reports, save scenario, okay. And what does it want us to do? It wants us to solve the model keeping the solver solution. So let's see what that says. So right here, keep solver solution. That looks good. And then we're going to go ahead and say okay. So now we have the solver model down here. Great. Now let's go back. So we've done everything through step 10. That leaves us down to the last step of step 11. So Enzo wants to document the answer the solver found, including the constraints and a list of the values the solver changed to solve the problem. So we're going to solve the model again, this time choosing to produce an answer report, and then we're going to give that report a specific name. So back to our file, we're going to go up to the solver. Here's our parameters again. Everything is still there. We are going to go ahead and solve the model again. Now this time when this window comes up, and last time we just clicked OK. This time we want to click on the report side, and we want to click on answer. And then we are going to go ahead and click OK, and it's going to generate an answer report, which is down here on this tab. So now we have down below, this is the answer report, giving us all the technical details of what happened, what went into the solver model, and then we're just going to give this the name schedule answer report. So schedule answer report. Make sure you spell things right on the tabs when you change the names, because the grader will get you on that one. Happens to me. It's happened to me a few times. And then use that as the name, and then that's it. So now all we have left to do is just compare our sheets to the solution. So here is our solution. So let's go back and compare. So let's go to the staff sheet, and we should see everything should look the same. That looks good. It's hard to tell. We don't see that yellow pop-up, but that's okay. Then we've got this, the weekly scenarios. We should have current, promotions, and raise prices. So let's make sure that one's in there. Current values, promotions, and raise prices. And the amount should be the same, 13 to a little over 2,000 and 2,770. Great. And then what's the next one? We've got this pivot table worksheet. So promotion and raise prices. Let's make sure ours looks the same right here. Yep, that looks good. Then we're going to go down to the weekly budget, and we should see this over on the right. Number of guests should be at 15. Looks good. Then let's go to the next one. Here's our answer report worksheet. All the data that we put in. So schedule answer report. And then the last thing we should have as a schedule. And the schedule should look like this with the solver model below, with the values, the trues, and some numbers. And we have the schedule, and that looks good. So your last step is to submit. If you have any errors or the grader comes back and says you missed anything and you're not able to figure out what that is, please make sure to reach out to me and I'll help you. Now, here's a great example of what happens if you don't name a worksheet correctly. So I missed a step, took all my 9 points away because it said the budget should contain a worksheet named Weekly Budget Pivot Table. So let's go back to my file. I'm going to have to open it again. So I'm going to open my start file. And then weekly, oh, see, there it is. I left out the T in budget. So there you go. I said all along throughout the video, if you name things wrong, it's going to get missed. And sure enough, I was a perfect example of that. So there's an example of how to fix things. I'm going to save this again, resubmit it, and it should fix my points. Again, if you have any questions, let me know.